Good day, everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar, Modernize Traditional Applications with Docker and HPE Synergy. I would like to introduce today's speakers, Tricia McCanna, Product Marketing Docker, and Gary Harris, Global Container Center of Excellence, HPE. Tricia, I will now turn things over to you.
Thanks, Melanie. So as a leading software container platform, Docker is at the center of major IT strategies like app modernization, hybrid IT, and DevOps. Because the Docker platform fundamentally solves the works with my machine problem and is the only container platform that supports both Windows, Linux, and mainframe applications. Because of this, Docker has seen a 40% market share growth in just the last 12 months, and over 400 global 2,000 companies use Docker today. And the Docker platform has evolved over the last 4 years. We now are delivering many purposes across many users and various infrastructures. So with the Moby project, our open source project, it allows contributors and ecosystem partners to work together in this framework. With Docker Community Edition and Docker Enterprise Edition, we've evolved to provide the community supporting tools with Community Edition, and Enterprises, a container management platform that actually delivers the enterprise tools and security that they really need to deploy applications at scale. Enterprise organizations today spend 80% of their IT budget maintaining legacy applications and only about 20% on innovation. So this ratio has not significantly changed over the last 20 years. And at the same time, the number of IT platforms organizations are managing has only increased. Organizations on average today manage 8 different platforms, both on-premises and in the cloud. Focusing on innovation has always been challenging, and the problem is only getting harder as there are more application infrastructure stacks to support and manage. If we look at the existing solutions in the market, including the last 2 major IT paradigms of the last 15 years, virtualization and public cloud, you start to see that these solutions only exacerbate the problem by not being able to address the entire IT portfolio. You have virtualization, which works great for traditional applications, but not so well for new microservices architectures or cloud-native applications. And you have public clouds, which work well for these net new cloud-native apps and a growing set of traditional and packaged apps, but are not fully compatible with on-premise environments. So moving a VM on-prem into a public cloud is still a huge undertaking. There are newer PaaS solutions. They really are focused on net new native applications or cloud-native applications. PaaS solutions can be deployed in the cloud, but are often deployed on-prem. So while they do help companies innovate, they only address a small percentage of what an enterprise organization actually owns, which ends up being less than 5 to 10% of their entire application portfolio. So organizations start going down these paths are having, to have separate operational islands where they duplicate efforts, tools, processes. So pockets of organizations can innovate, but these efforts are isolated. So in comes Docker Enterprise Edition. So Docker Enterprise Edition is the only containers as a service platform for IT that manages and secures diverse applications across disparate infrastructure, both on-premises and in the cloud. Docker EE brings containerization not only just microservices, but traditional and packaged apps, and is the only container solution that works with Linux, Windows, and mainframe, as well as public clouds. By covering this broad set of apps and infrastructure, we bring the raw benefits of Docker containers, things like application delivery, improved portability, and the consistent way to build, ship, and run applications. And we bring together the entire IT environment so that an organization can deal with it from one central place. Now organizations are able to innovate across the board, so supporting efforts to both modernize applications, infrastructures, and processes, while saving organizations money through improved resource utilization and easier maintenance and operation. So at Docker, what we've come to bring this new methodology around modernizing traditional applications, and it all stems from our work that we've done on Docker Enterprise Edition. So now that you know more about Docker EE and you're interested in how to start with Docker EE, we've actually created a turnkey program that allows you to realize the value of Docker in just 5 days, so that you can see for yourself how much time and money you can save by containerizing traditional applications with Docker EE. This program, we've worked collectively with our ecosystem and alliance partners, specifically HPE, to jointly deliver a monthly or a full month POC engagement that helps you install and configure Docker EE and containerizes an existing Java or .NET application. And today on the call we have Gary Harris from HPE. He's from the Global Container Centers of Excellence, and he's going to talk to you today about HPE's Modernizing Your Traditional Applications program and pilot, and how they can work with you to deliver and containerize your applications on-prem.
Thank you, Tricia. Today we're going to talk about some of the challenges our CEOs face, some of the architectures that are conducive to increasing those operational and cost reduction measures in the data center. So, as Tricia mentioned, almost 80% of the budgets are typically locked. IT is typically viewed as a cost center, and we all know that. And many of the CIOs and CTOs have been focusing on business agility, which is really moving to agile processes, optimizing application delivery costs, and looking at those aspects of service delivery. When you look at the larger equations of capital expenditures and how do you improve overall efficiencies, when you consider operational efficiencies, how am I using every member of my operations team most efficiently? How am I making the best use of their time? Am I delivering the most density, the easiest to use? Am I getting a cloud-like experience and making my overall operations team and my operations capabilities more efficient? It's especially critical that as CEOs start to look at these big picture items, they look at the tools that are at their disposal, in particular the refresh cycle, and what are the best choices architecturally and performance economically to improve their overall business benefits and improve those efficiencies. So we've been working with Docker, and Docker is a fantastic partner in this area on a program called Modernizing Traditional Applications. And what this really means when you look at this, and everyone's familiar with container technology for the most part, there is an analog associated with virtual machines, but what the containerization can do is help you improve a lot of your efficiencies by eliminating a lot of the unnecessary virtual machines, meaning I can improve the density of containers on each virtual machine. I can improve the density on my server footprint and produce not only just capital expenditure improvements, but operational and licensing costs as well. Now, as you move forward, there's also many benefits to containerization, because as you move forward and you modernize the operating system, you're taking advantage of newer code, latest security patches, those types of things. Those are some of the more obvious benefits. But as you start the journey towards modernizing the code architecture, and now aligning that to more of your modernizing your development processes, you will see that the greater all security that you're going to improve is generally because you are now, you're starting to separate concerns, and from a security perspective, containers can vastly improve your security and reduce the attack surface. So there are many benefits associated with moving to containerization, from a software delivery, a software security, and the development perspective. So as I mentioned, there are many analogs, and as we move from from the Unix programming environment. So anyone who's been programming for the last 40 years is familiar with the Unix environment. And then as we moved towards the 1990s and 2000s, Linux became very popular and became very prolific in the programming and development environments. And as we moved forward, obviously virtualization is a technique to virtualize hardware. It basically emulates hardware so that you can run multiple guest operating systems on top of that. And that's the role of the hypervisor. And those hypervisors were meant to run guest OS, and they have their own memory management, they have their own messaging, so you have a lot of the overhead associated with each virtual machine. So as you run your apps in these environments, you have considerable overhead. Now, as you move forward to Docker containers let you run your applications much more efficiently. So not only are you getting CPU performance potentially, but you're also getting benefits of the lower overhead of sharing resources. So libraries, operating system resources are shared, but you're getting that sharing with protection and the benefits of the security that Docker has built into their capabilities. So one example of a corporation that has seen considerable benefit, and we've seen many over the last year with containerization, is being able to save up to 70% on the VM. So by that, I mean the actual number of virtual machines deployed in the data center. You can reduce the actual footprint of the VMs being managed. So you have, in essence, you have a greater app to VM ratio because of that density of the containers on the operating system. And by doing so, you can actually solve a problem with licensing costs, with server costs, because you're increasing the density. And so power cooling, all those things come into factor when you look at the overall ROI model of how to calculate these costs. So obviously things like saving on guest operating system licenses, these are all factored into the benefits that can be obtained by moving to containers and by modernizing traditional applications. So what we've seen from a server technology, obviously in the early days we had very specialized purpose computers. We had multiple processor formats, RISC technology. And as we move forward, we've seen that there's a greater need to become more programmatic, more deterministic, and more standardized, so that one of the challenges is you had very specialized teams handling one set of compute and another doing other forms of compute. So it becomes very tedious over time to scale these entities. And what really HPE has looked at and solved for is the ability to not just deploy rapidly, not just have stateless compute, and not just programmability, but the ability to have fluid resource pools. So by that I mean being able to carve out the right amount of storage and compute and network capabilities so that you can deliver your apps with the performance that they need. And that's a key here. So being able to deliver these programmatically through JSON APIs, and we'll go into that in a few minutes, but the composable architecture that HPE has created with these Synergy and Simplicity platforms has some unique capabilities that we've married with Docker so that we have reference architectures and capabilities that are far beyond the normal, and we'll go into that in a minute. So the first step is obviously looking at the application. It's always about the application. So we have to look at what is the application that we want to put onto the environment. And by looking at how we deploy the application into the Docker container, we can often improve the efficiencies. As I mentioned earlier, maybe it's obviously guest OS and removing those those elements from the design, but simplifying the architecture and also through the tools that Docker has created, we can improve the efficiencies of delivery as well. So looking at the refresh cycle, we can also look at some of the converged and hyper-converged options for deploying Docker Enterprise Edition and thus the containers on these platforms. And when we look at how we can enable hybrid IT, we'll talk about this in a second, but what the Synergy platform really does is give you the capability of delivering cloud capabilities on your premise with Docker Enterprise Edition. And it's really about these things coming together, the modernizing the apps, improving the efficiency, improving the operational capabilities, and the ability to deliver cloud-like capabilities on your premise is very compelling with the cost savings and ROI benefits that you'll achieve. So let's take a little bit to look at the actual MTA pilot service itself. So it's a 30-day pilot, and what we want to do is be able to deploy Docker Enterprise Edition on your premise. So it's yours. You will have the capability for your teams to use and get familiarized with the Enterprise Edition platform. We also want to look at 1 to 3 candidate applications, and these applications are typically Windows.NET format, Java Enterprise Edition, and typically those applications are good candidates for being able to be containerized. So by that, we remove them from the guest OS and we compose them into a Docker container or a Docker image, technically. And so we will work side by side with your teams to create that containerized app. So we're not working in a vacuum. We're working hand in hand with your teams, with your teams who are subject matter experts. And those subject matter experts are typically those who are familiar with the source and how to actually build the application. So you can take those artifacts and build them into a Docker container without modifying the code. So it becomes a team effort. Your team is learning how to do this and make this repeatable. So we take that application, we deploy it on Docker Enterprise Edition, and then we deploy it onto the infrastructure. And during that process, we let you experience that and test that, and you can start to look at, well, I did save this amount of memory, and yes, it has this kind of performance. So you can start to see those benefits on your own. It's not something that you're getting from us. It'll be something that you can definitely achieve on your own. And the service is designed to work together so that your teams are enabled to work towards that goal. So what are the typical use cases? Obviously, we've talked about cost reduction and making the applications more efficient, using more efficient, more converged hardware, optimizing your operations teams. These are all very important. And then the second use case is allowing the larger enterprise to start to move applications into this environment. So moving from a lower density, higher sprawled environment to a high density, high capacity, highly operational efficient environment. And then obviously we've talked about delivering faster. Docker containers, DevOps tools, automation, continuous integration go together hand in glove to deliver your services faster. These are all very compelling reasons to start to look at the modernizing traditional applications program and see how that might fit into your IT environment. So what we've done is we partnered very closely with the Docker team to create a process to evaluate your applications and work with you to determine what are the right applications to move into the environment, and defining the right proof of concept or pilot environment to execute Docker Enterprise Edition within that environment. And we've also created the methodology so that you make sure that you've had the right team members. We have the teams that can help your teams understand Docker Enterprise Edition, as well as start to convert those apps and start yourself on the journey to containerization. So you have choices. You have choices to make. And as I mentioned earlier, Synergy is a platform that allows high-density, stateless compute, programmatic interfaces. It really starts to make the server bare metal capable. And it enables, and not only that, but you can now program that environment and it becomes deterministic. So that's really what composable means. Composable is repeatable, deterministic. Your ops teams can deploy rapidly. You can deploy Docker capabilities very rapidly with any of the capabilities through automation and through the Synergy OneView interfaces. There are demos available on YouTube. We can go over that in a second as well. So very impressive capabilities. So being able to deploy rapidly, being able to deploy with quality and efficiency, removing a lot of the operational errors are key in your capabilities as you move forward. You need that level of deterministic behavior when you're deploying your apps. And there's also the SimpliVity platform. Now, I'll talk about SimpliVity in a minute, but this is a hyper-converged platform that lets you federate your capabilities. So it's a highly efficient storage platform that lets you share and grow a hyper-converged environment, so able to carve out the right amount of storage and federate that among other SimpliVity platforms. So now that you can grow and scale very efficiently. So those of you familiar with Docker, you know that there's a UCP control plane, and there are worker nodes. So the worker nodes are the ones that actually are running your containers, your containerized applications. So being able to scale that out very rapidly and very efficiently, and again very deterministically, meaning I have infrastructure as code type of approach where I programmatically deploy it. My ops teams do it consistently. They do it in minutes and not days or hours. So that's very efficient. So what HPE and Docker have done is created the architectures to make this very efficient for you to consume, very easy to adopt this program in your environments. So as I mentioned, Synergy provides fluid resource pools, bare metal management, so you can have that capability of that cloud capability on your environment. You can take a Docker worker node image and deploy it in literally minutes. And it has a programmable JSON interface, that's JavaScript object notation, so that you can automate that. You can connect it up to your existing automation tools, Jenkins, Puppet, Chef, Ansible, all your favorite automation. You can program it. You can program the capabilities with the Synergy image streamer. You can provide not just stateless compute, but you can now load in your the personality of the operating system from a menu. So just like you would on any cloud environment, you can choose the golden image or guest OS you want to deploy, and Image Streamer will fire that up within minutes, and you'll have your worker nodes up and running. So the reference architectures are created. They've been done. There's technical white papers, and you can use these in your environment. They're ready to go, and they provide the density and the capability along with these advanced programmatic capabilities to give you the ultimate platform to deliver Docker Enterprise Edition. So I mentioned SimpliVity, and SimpliVity is really, it's a very unique hyper-converged platform. It enables federated pooling. So as I add and scale capabilities, the fabric grows with it, the storage grows with it. I don't have to think about that. It's highly efficient storage capability, provides SSD performance with the capability of disk. So you're really getting a storage optimized platform. And with the automation that we have, your UCP and DTR and worker nodes are really deployed with automation and deployed in minutes. So we've taken a lot of the questions and a lot of the challenges out of making cloud capabilities onto on-premise, and we've delivered that through our solutions. So really it comes down to, are you ready? Are you ready, and are you interested in this program? This is something that Docker and HPE have worked deeply together on, from creating the right reference architecture, building the right solutions to take a hard look at how you operate containers in your environment. How do you deliver scale in your environment, and how do you do that with consistency? And we've talked about synergy and simplicity as being the platforms that can really help you achieve that high degree of density, the high degree of deterministic composability that you need for operational efficiency. So the next step would really be to start talking to your sales representatives and set up a meeting with HPE and Docker. We work together as a team with you, and we work together to determine what is the right application, what's the Docker Enterprise Edition environment look like, how do we set that up and make it run optimally for what you're trying to achieve. And then we can, once we agree on what the application should be, once we agree on how we should work together and get started, we can review a statement of work and sign that, and then join in on the effort, and we'll work together to deliver your application onto the Docker Enterprise environment and composing the application within a Docker image. So, and then following that, we'll work together with you ongoing. Once we leave the site, we'll work together with you to help sure that you are able to be productive with that, and we'll work through, and we can talk about other service capabilities to move you forward and advance this application or multiple applications into production. So that's really the goal here, is to help you make really efficient decisions, efficiency from a capital expenditure perspective, making sure that you've got the right equipment to have the right density, to provide the highest density capabilities for your Docker Enterprise Edition, so your apps are running most efficiently, so you can start to achieve some of those cost reductions that you'd like to achieve.
Thank you very much, Gary, for going through the MTA with HPE POC program. To recap, we just want to say, go download the MTA kit at docker.com/MTA. And if this is something that you're interested in pursuing with Docker and HPE, please be sure to either contact myself or Gary directly, or sales@docker.com. And we'll be able to take you, we can help you with the deep dive ROI, look through, we'll get you started containerizing your legacy applications, so we can make sure you get ahead. And we have all the expertise and knowledge to do that, so you don't have to kind of beat your head against the wall trying to figure out how to get started. We'll go in, get you started, get you up and running in 5 days, and go from there. So question from Joe, how do you show performance improvement when VMs are converted to CAS platform?
Well, let me handle that one. I think that's a great question. And it really depends on the applications. For example, web applications, there are several great open source and other tools that you can use to measure the performance. So there's obvious measures like storage. The HPE OneView provides the storage and performance capabilities of your server. That's one approach. There are other tools that you can use to measure the actual performance of web applications and other means of doing synthetic testing. But that's generally the best way, is to look at the actual performance of the app. That's what we've seen our clients do in the past, is using their test tools, and they can actually determine some of that. So it really depends on whether it's web or other types of applications.
The question is from Madhu. The question is, do you spend time with devs to convert .NET to Docker?
Yes, absolutely. That is what we do. Is we spend time with the developers, the build teams, the individual who are responsible for creating the artifacts. So, obviously, longer term, we would like to build this into your overall process. That's not a part of the MTA exactly. The MTA is really about getting that app into compose within the Docker environment. That's the objective. But yes, .NET is, there's a slightly different architecture for .NET, and we would be using more than likely a Windows 2016 server image for supporting that. But yes, absolutely, yes is the answer. And so the image, the server image support goes back to Windows 2003, I believe. And so server 2003, 2008, 12, et cetera, can be modernized up to server 2016.
And then we had another question kind of along those lines of what parameters do you use to target any .NET application? You covered that a bit, Gary, but I don't know if you wanted to elaborate any further. Well, I think you did.
Okay, so what parameters? So generally, the parameters are, we have to look at the IIS server vintages, and there are a few things that we have to do. Obviously, I mentioned we would not support or typically wouldn't support below 2003, but you know, the application has to be assessed on a few different criteria as far as commercial off-the-shelf or COTS apps are generally not the best applications to choose. Desktop apps are typically not great candidates as well either. So there are a few criteria that we use that we can go through in greater detail in pre-sales. And we go through that with your dev team so that you understand what are the ideal candidates for containerization.
And then Gary, one last question is around the cost of an MTA engagement and the cost.
Well, yes. So there's, obviously when we're in pre-sales, that part's free. We don't. There's no charge for discussing if the client's apps are a good fit for containerization. That part is free. Once we agree that an app can be converted and we want to work together, and we work together to deploy Enterprise Edition and compose the app and work with your teams to compose that app and deploy it onto Enterprise Edition. That part is not free, and that's roughly a $35,000 service in the U.S. market.
Great. I think that concludes our Q&A portion. I think we've answered all the questions in the box. Well, Gary, thank you for presenting today. And everyone, thank you for attending. And I think this concludes our webinar, Modernizing Traditional Applications with Docker and HPE. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Gary Harris or Tricia McCanna or sales@docker.com, and we'll be sure to get you in contact with the right person to get started with your MTA project.